defeat you and he comes close, he will insist that Twangwa na mawe. You understand? So even here, if you look ahead, we have to see it. Whoever ignores Honorable Raila in 2022 will be in the opposition. So those of us in Jubilee who want to continue in power, we sit and say, trouble is not coming from Honorable Kalonzo or Honorable Mudavadi. The big fish in the room is Honorable Raila. If we are going to stay in power, how are we going to defeat him? Now you will cheer until you find yourself.
Well, I don't know.
You see, big.
You see, you are saying, if I heard you correct,
yes,
if Ruto was to meet with Raila Odinga would try against Ruto. Which to me is not true.
And
which to me is not true.
In 2022,
which to me is not true.
All right.
Maybe be that as me.
He will not come out.
Be that as it may.
Yes.
Be that as it may. I respect your opinion, of course. But number one, yes, it is true that Peter Kenneth has done some few miscalculations. But to me, they are not really miscalculations. You see, number one, I'm not aware of any person who have ascended to the presidency in this country by winning in the first term with the first attempt. Mr. Kibaki tried to become the president of this country after losing in 1992. He lost. He vied in 1997. He lost. He won in the year 2002. Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta vied in the year 2002. He lost. He did not vie in 2007. He won in 2013.
All right.
So therefore, no, allow me to speak because they have really spoken.
Yeah,
so therefore, my argument is...
I want to move this conversation
it is quite important. My argument is the fact that former MP for Gatanga has lost does not mean that is the end of his political career. That's number one. Number two, I think he possesses some other attributes which, to me, they are sellable. They are quite important. And they're also quite strategic. You cannot, for instance, ignore the Murang'a factor in our community's politics. It has never been harnessed. It has never been harnessed, but this is the time it will be harnessed. Why? Because for now, for instance, we don't have a presumptive leader. No, it is the reality now. Yeah, right. It's the reality.
Michael, and I want us to move on to other things.
I'm just going to mention one thing. I think when Kenyans watch...
Sorry. Allow me to interject. No. Allow me to interject. There is something he said and I had forgotten. I have to reply so that he can get the right of it. He had said, number one, that in mature democracies, people after they are elected, there's no campaigning or something. That is not true. If you go to a place like Italy, how many elections are usually held in a year or even in a span of 2 years? Governments are always being formed today. They are collapsing, I don't know, after 2 months. And electioneering is part of Italian political culture. That does not mean Italian economy has been getting smaller. It has been growing. That's number one. Number two, another point you said, which I have to correct.
We need to give him time. We need to give...
I think he's saying exactly what I was saying, but just in a different word. He's saying collapsing. Nothing collapsed if there were no issues around it. And so we are looking at a perfect system in Kenya where we have a president, we have an opposition that has joined the president, and all they're thinking of is how do we develop this country for the next 5 years. There's something I wanted to say. When you have the likes of people coming from Murang'a and saying, we are the people that must be the deputy to the then, if he becomes the president, Ruto, and you have people coming from Kiambu, and you have people coming from Meru and saying, this is our position, then we are having an issue that people have been discussing in this country, whether the presidency only belongs to the Kikuyus and the Kalenjins. And the Kalenjins and the Kikuyus. I think this is where they are really starting to dig their own grave, in the sense that when you start campaigning based on two tribes, at this early stage, you're making other people feel let out. And when they're left out, they will gang up and group up, just like Weda is saying. And when they gang up and group up, there will be another acrimony election like what we've had in the past. Remember that the elections in the past have not been so intensely fought because people want to be president, but because people felt that they were excluded. They're not part of the system. They're not part of the government. And so when you have these groups starting to think the same way we've been thinking in 2002, in 2007, in 2017, and then we're thinking 2022, then where is this country going? I believe there are other leaders in this country, other than the Kalenjins and the Kikuyus, that can also become the president and the deputy president. And that should be that inclusivity. When you start rallying people and saying, this is the one we want you to take as a deputy president, and there could be somebody at the course also thinking, how do we even ascend to this position? And remember, the problem with the course people is they've never been hugely represented in the executive well. And when you look at the western part of the country, of course, we have the likes of Mudavadi, who have become deputy president for the shortest stint of time in the history of this country, and many others. But I believe that this group of people that are saying Gatanga member of parliament now need to be deputy and nobody else should now start thinking about Kenya. And if that's what we want for the country, then this country will move forward. But if we bring tribal inclination in it, then we are fighting, we are starting to wage a war that we will not be able to use to develop this country for the next 5 years.
All right, and I want us now to move from campaign and matters politics, because we have other issues that we're dealing with here. And this is to do with contraband sugar. Let me come to you, Ambrose Sweda, and the progress that we've made so far. We do have Rai, who's going to be appearing before Parliament today. But do you feel like we're getting closer to the end of this sugar issue than we were before?
Yes, I think if you look at... let Kenyans get this clearly, that normally there is the contraband sugar that comes through the porous borders. Then there are the legally imported sugar. Legally imported sugar fall into two categories. Completely processed sugar, like you would go to Uganda, you would come to our local companies and buy to sell, import for direct consumption. That is one category. Then there is the raw sugar that is supposed to be imported and then continues in processing and then sold. That's a second category. So all these are legal. When we had the drought last year, and before, originally, nearly every person who could import was allowed to import. And in that confusion, I think, and through negligence of the SGS that the country has appointed to inspect, to do shipment inspection, and the KEBs in this country, some sugar, which was not fit for human consumption,
ended up here.
Yet the sugar which is raw should have ended. It goes to the factory, it is reprocessed, and then it is sold. So where we are going, when some of these people talk, when you hear some powerful people talk and then they say, I'm not alone. He's not saying that my sugar was raw and I sold it to the public. He's saying, I'm not alone. We are heading somewhere. Where are we heading? We are heading where we know that this raw sugar should have been processed and somebody should be punished. We are also heading somewhere where we are saying KEBs should up their games or there is punishment. Thirdly, we also know that the shipment or pre-importation inspection should be tightened in such a way that sugar which ought not to come into this country is not allowed. So when you see heads rolling, the heat that has been generated, the fact that ministers are now being called to come and give answers, all these things, I look at them and say it's a positive step for the country.
The right direction. Honorable Rungo Kangata, your thoughts on where we are today, and even on campaigns like you are in Eldoret. Kenyans, I'm sure, would have been happier to hear the progress that we're making regarding some of this contraband sugar, rather than tell us about a leader for 2022 who, honestly speaking, we have bigger issues to deal with right now.
Yes, of course, you know, those issues are usually dealt by leaders. So therefore, there's a connection between the two. Be that as it may, let me say, from where I see it, I think we need to change our viewpoint, the way we look at this problem. I would propose that we decentralized enforcement of standards. Currently, we have centralized enforcement of standards. I would imagine you have so many goods in this country, and all those goods, Kenyans, we are praying and depending on KBS to ensure those goods are good. They are good. That is not possible. That is not practically possible. And so, even from a scientific point of view, because you know in research, when you are doing research, you do something that is called sampling. And there's something called a sampling frame. So you are talking of a few staff who are here in Nairobi who are supposed to do sampling for millions of goods, including sugar, including other consumables which are out there in the market. So it means because the sample will be very small, then what we call the margin of error will be very high, because the less the sample size, the larger the margin of error. So from where I see it, we need to decentralize that. How do you do that? From where I see it, I would propose Parliament to consider, and probably with initiation by the executive, one, we have a profession of scientists. Maybe we create a scientist board. Then number two, people who have done Bachelor of Science at Chiromo and other universities. And then those people are given the power to do standardization. And if you go around and you find there's a problem with a certain commodity, you first punish that professional who gave out that standardization mark or standardization certificate, and then you also confiscate that good. Otherwise, I don't see the capability of all of us taking goods to KBS and us waiting for KBS to be able to be able to provide, to ensure bad goods don't permeate into our market. That to me is not possible.
All right, Michael Agwanda.
Mike, the problem of sugar is very strategically calculated. We are where we are today because our representatives in the Senate and in Parliament have been recipients of the nice sugar money. When we had Sugar Act 20...
Can I interject?
No,
it's unfair. It's unfair to generalize. It's unfair to generalize. You should say who this person, this member of Parliament.
Let me allow him to finish so that if he does, maybe he's going to become specific.
Oh, no, specify. Yeah, please name. Am I there? Am I there?
You're not a sugar baron. The reason why I say this is in 2001, there was a Sugar Act. The Sugar Act was controlling on how sugar should be grown in this country, how much, and it was about 25% of this sugar levy that was supposed to go for research. And then there was sugar farming that was supposed to benefit from this. That's what also created the Sugar Board. And then in 2013, they came up with something called Crop Act that did away with the Sugar Board and did away with also the other stuff that was supposed to be involved in planting sugarcane. Remember, planting and making sure that the sugarcane in this country is a huge, enormous task that many, many people are not able to do. And that is what the Sugar Act of 2001 was supposed to help this country with. But when this 2013 act of what we call the Crop Act came into Parliament, our parliamentarians, and mostly, and I will excuse you, my brother here, I know he was in Parliament then, mostly the MPs and members of Parliament from the sugar-growing region, none of them even raised a finger. In fact, one of the people that drafted that thing was actually a member of Parliament at that particular time who was coming from that region and is now a governor. You understand this? And what they did is they did away with all the sugar research money. They did away, and there is no sugar research that is happening in this country because they don't have the resources. There is no money that is now building the roads that was actually in the Sugar Act 2001. There is no money that is supposed to be invested in planting sugar. This was a strategy. Remember that most places where sugar is being grown, these sugar barons that we're talking about today, the likes of the Rise that are importing sugars, they make sure that the person who becomes an MP in that area benefits from them and will not raise a finger against them. And that is including Moroni, including all the western places you're talking about. These members of Parliament are culpable to this offense. They benefit. This is the money that makes them go to Parliament, and they cannot put a finger on it. Now, as we come to where we are today, This is what I say, and I know my brother here may not like it, but this is a clear division of another thief looking at the other thief and saying, but you stole a chicken, and me, I've stolen a goat, and now you want me to suffer. No, no, no. There's a clear division in the government where you have the DP side of group running ministries and being involved in all these other fiascos, and also the president side of group that are also involved in their other corruption. And so when the DP says, the DP side sees that these guys have stolen some money here and nothing has happened to them, or they're in health, and as we're in agriculture, they also get involved in the little bit of stealing this side. And when they steal, they don't steal. They really take a big chunk. And when the other side sees, oh, why are you taking a big chunk here? And they say, but you also did this. And then you find a situation where basically, even within the executive, the Minister of Interior is saying one thing, the Minister of Trade is saying one thing, and you think this is by coincidence. It's absolutely not by coincidence. It's the infighting in the government, and the question of whether there is division in the government today or not is not something that we need to debate, because it's a fact. It's a fact. Until this government realizes that it's one government, it's not the DP side and the Uhuru, the President Uhuru side, but it's one government that needs to work for the people of Kenya. We are not going to achieve the agenda for until, and again, when we're talking about devolving some of this testing, I agree that's a very good idea. But do you know how powerful it is when a minister calls a junior KEBS guy who's just doing a research, a testing, and says, can you pass those goods as soon as you can? It will be done whether the result is fake or right. They know it. We are catching up the wrong people. The big guys who are making these commands are known, and they need to go to jail.
We need to wrap up, gentlemen, because of time. Let me start with you, Ambrose Wede. Your closing thoughts on today on the waiters.
Yeah, I think we should have sugar development levy, rein in on some of these barons that control the institutions, both the sugar board and the rest, and then the importation and so on. And secondly, I think let us go back to development. Let us do the agenda, the 4 agendas, so that the country moves forward. 2022, 2028, 2020 what? Please, our children would have a better country. Our grandchildren should have a better country. So those of you who are initiating running mates and mates and are jumping up and down, please support the president in his fight against corruption and his fight to develop this country.
Honorable Irungu Kangata, your closing thoughts? Very briefly.
Yes, on the issue of ethnic politics, which has been raised by my colleague, I support the expansion of the executive. And therefore, I would support a constitutional change. That, to me, would assist in bringing the idea of inclusivity, so that you have as many ethnic groups represented in the executive as possible. And by that way, you bring everyone on board. So on that score, on that point, I agree with the proponents for a constitutional change. I think the way this constitution was crafted, those people are not people who are well-trained in what we call ethnically divided society, politics of ethnically divided society, or constitutions which fit ethnically divided societies. They were not very well trained in that area.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. We'll have to wind up there because of time. I know Michael Agwanda have not given you a chance, but we're really out of time, and we'll have to wrap it up right there. So Ambrose Wede, who's a lawyer, Michael Agwanda, an governance consultant, and Senator Irungu Kangata, who's also the Deputy Chief Whip in the Senate. Thank you for joining us this morning, and that's the way it is. It is 7:30. We're going to take a short break. Do stay with us. We have updates of the World Cup coming up in just a bit.